Hey friends, my name is James. I'm one of the 5th years this year, and I was in 4th year in 2017. I just wanted to share a little bit of my experience as a 4th year student, as well as my rotations as well, and how I studied for 4th year. So my rotations were, in my opinion, I think one of the most practical ones. I had psychiatry at MMC for my first rotation, and I had GP, PEDS in MMC and KC, as well as women's as my last rotation in MMC and Sandringham Hospital. Now, I think studying really took up most of my time in 4th year, and I think as you guys know how important the exams at the end of 4th year is. So I probably did about 3 hours of studying on average per day nearing the end of first semester, and I usually kind of spread it out more on the weekends as well as a little bit less on the weekdays, because wards usually take up much of the time over the weekdays. Now, just breaking down the different main themes. So I know Pedram has given some guidelines on what to share, and I just want to share just basically on the different themes itself. So in terms of psychiatry, I think the most important thing is knowing your DSM-5 criteria really well. There are a lot of lecture notes on pharmacology as well as other senior lecture slides that's available for revision, and I think those are really helpful as well. So the main things that you need to know about psychiatry is to learning how to differentiate between different conditions, basically by their time frames, their duration of presenting symptoms, the main symptoms that each conditions actually exhibit, as well as learning to ask the right questions during OSCEs. And asking the right questions is really important to show that the examiners that you're thinking about them. Another huge emphasis is definitely pharmacology. Pharmacology is one main topic in psychiatry, and you need to know your drug, your antipsychotics, antidepressants, including the indications, contraindications, specific instruction on taking them, and their possible alternatives as well. In terms of GP, I used mainly my personal year 3 notes, as well as RAC GP guidelines, and they are really helpful. There are some slides that the GP department will give, not exactly very helpful, but there are some value to it as well. So use it wisely, and use it when you have time. I think a Metak GP textbook was also helpful in terms of giving differential diagnosis, as well as going through the different approaches. So I think learning the differential diagnosis well is really important, and be broad in your thinking processes, especially in year 4. So going through different systems and not just covering the main systems. For example, shortness of breath can be differentiated into cardio, respiratory, hematology, and other different areas as well. Knowing your GP 10-step management, you guys might not know what that is, but once you do your GP rotation, it must be in your head. You must really go through it like it's something at the back of your hand. Make sure that you know your ENT and dermatology well as well, because they are not very well taught, but because of time constraints, but it is really high yield in terms of exam as well. In terms of PEDS, I think PEDS is by far one of the easier EMQs, comparing between the 4 rotations, and many of the EMQs are based on spotting the diagnosis. So it's really important that you know what are the main symptoms for different types of conditions, and learn a little bit more on the less orthodox, so more unorthodox, less bread and butter conditions. But you must know your respiratory, cardio, and gastro conditions really well, and knowing about the management. But other than that, not much on management is usually tested. Main study resource is usually Toronto notes and past exam papers if that has been released from faculty as well. That can be helpful. Women's, I think making sure that you download most of, or rather all of the protocols from Prompt. So there's this Monash guidelines called Prompt, if you haven't known, and that's your main studying material. So both OSCEs and EMQs as well, you need to know them inside out. So ensure that you know those guidelines, making sure that you know the guidelines for OPS, emergency cases, and learn obstetrics with different specific conditions instead of going through as like approaches. But gynecology, go through during as approaches, especially for OSCEs as well. Okay, so I think the thing I find most difficult is to attain a balance and ensure that you're in a steady state instead of instead of burning out because you start studying too early as well. Remember, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and studying for VIAS is actually the most important, and I think VIAS kind of saved me a little bit. So start as soon as possible, but making sure that you are doing it consistently instead of doing it in a burst and then feeling burnt out. Assignments in fourth year is usually manageable, and finding manageable in terms of doing it, but finding a suitable yet interesting patient may be a little bit challenging. So do spend a little bit more time in that before starting on your assignments. So obviously, in terms of whether I want to do it again, definitely not. But if I had to change one thing, I think I'd have taken longer holidays and traveling in June, especially during longer weekends as well. I think having that balance is just really important, and not just studying yourself. Usually, in terms of downtime itself, I usually set aside at least one full day, spread across the different different days. So sometimes it can be 2 nights on the weekdays and maybe half a day on the weekends, and that's just for me to have enough time to recover, and that includes watching your dramas, your Korean dramas, your American dramas, YouTubing, FaceTiming with your family and friends, going out, but most importantly, sleep whenever you can, because you need to rest to study well. Okay, in terms of maintaining mental health, I think it's arguably the most difficult, and many will realize their poor state of mental health or mental state far too late, and they really suffer at the end of the day. And I think maintaining mental health really involves about giving your mind a break away from medicine. So you need to have something that will keep you away from medicine for the time being. So for example, myself, I always have a hobby or a side project, for example, planning my holidays, planning trips, road trips, that brings me away from my from medicine. I also have some fellowship commitments, and these really helps keep me sane throughout fourth year, in fact. But of course, take short breaks, and if you find yourself not studying effectively, stop, take a break and continue later. Well, I guess my last part is not really part of study tip, but a small pep talk about life. My motto in life is to work hard and play harder, and I haven't regretted a single bit following that that motto. And I think I think it's really important to have a short-term goal, and that it will give you motivation to continue working harder, and reaching that goal gives that sense of satisfaction. So always have a small celebration, for example, after every rotation or after finishing an assignment, but most importantly, keep smiling and have ample rest. Your attitude towards studying towards year 4 is really important. If you adopt a positive one, fourth year is going to be a breeze for you. Alright, so I think really important is that studying is really about prioritizing your time. You're putting in hard work and dedication. No one can put expectations on yourself, or rather, no one can put expectations on you other than yourself and your parents, I guess. But of course, if they're sponsoring your studies. But most importantly, if you're happy, with what you're doing, with what you're achieving, that's all that matters. So I guess that's the end of my small little pep talk. Thank you so much for watching this, and thank you, Pedram, for the opportunity to just share about my fourth year experience. So thank you, and I hope I can see you guys in wards, and do feel free to ask for more stuff if you see me in wards or in the hospitals.